Session 597. Deleted. Now, good evening, and welcome back. And tell our friend that I said welcome back to him also. Now, I told you that when the book was finished, you could feel free to have some private sessions, if you so desired. You are welcome to them, but that is up to you. There is a session I promised to Our Lady of Venice also. Rob said, yes. They said, now, then, it is true that thoughts form reality, but the thoughts are like passengers, riding atop of emotional feelings or feeling tones. The feelings obviously help form the thought. On the surface, there are many feelings, sometimes highly ambiguous, that rise and fall and often compete for domination. Far beneath, however, at any given time in your turns, there is a dominant, characteristic, unique feeling tone that pervades the personality and colors all of the other activities, feelings, and thoughts. There is also a range at this level, however, and such a basic feeling tone will also of itself change into another. Feelings and thoughts exist in the ground of the basic feeling tone. In the case of individuals, such feeling tones pervade all experiences and perception, and can even therefore alter the perception of reality, therefore effectively changing it. And mass, the same story is true. The world as you know it, therefore at any given time is pervaded by its own ground feeling tone, in quotes, which becomes the medium from which and in which other feelings and ideas emerge. These are highly creative, regardless of the apparent effects of what you could call the less desirable ones. In a large sense, different basic feeling tones can dominate various incarnations. It must be understood that these are not static. However, these are reflected in every area physically and en masse. From the kind of thoughts entertained to the type of architecture chosen, say, by a people, and the general state of mental and physical health. Now, we are leading here into some personal and yet generally applied material. Robert is indeed out of the basic feeling tone that brought about his melody. The feeling tone, however, also helped to bring about our sessions as well, even though he did not become ill in your turns until afterward. The feeling tone, somewhat generated in childhood as I told you, was momentarily changed for the better when your relationship with him began. The feeling tone, however, was one of the issues that led him to seek soulful answers, and also made it very difficult for him to accept them. The creative liberation in his own work. Rob noted, since Seth's book has been finished, Jane has started 2 books of her own. They said it's a clear symptom on the positive side of the change in feeling tone, as was the more expensive idea of adding to your establishment. It is the feeling tone even more than the thoughts that dictate overall activity. The feeling tone will, of itself, alter the nature of the thoughts. Rob noted, leaning forward for emphasis. They said, the feeling, rather than the thought of confidence, is what he needs now. and his alpha experiences are leading him in that direction. The feeling tone can now be encouraged. The optimism and the sense of joy and accomplishment by indulging in those activities in which he is accomplished and takes joy. Rob noted noise upstairs. They said, for some time, your own feeling tone, however, was still not over the boundary in your turns to the positive side. For this reason, you often reinforce each other's poor moods. For example, the feeling tone that is presently for your purposes the best brings you a feeling and a sense of ease and abundance in any area of your present endeavors. Recognize this feeling when you have it, and do whatever seems to bring it about. You may take your break. We are starting out, and you may be surprised where we end up. Rob said, okay. They said, now, we will be writing other books, but never in such a way that you must plunge from one into another. The books will fall into their own reads overall in our sessions. You will have rest between, in other words. Rob noted, not that I'm worried. They said, the feeling tone of Rupert's mentioned earlier in your turns, the negative one, was triggered, as you know, by his reaction to your illness, which was followed by rising difficulties on the part of your own parents. He felt trapped by them, having to help them, as he felt trapped by his own mother. He felt then that the tables had been turned on him again. After a time of freedom, learning to handle these problems took him time, and again the problems themselves helped generate enough activity within his psychic centers to open up new channels. When he felt trapped, he adopted those symptoms, though to a much lesser degree, than his mother had when she was trapped. His childhood situation filled him with terror, yet there was the impetus of growing up to set him free. This time, he found himself in adulthood with no such escape in quotes offered or possible in the old terms. All in all, he surprised himself by his performance with your parents. Such a performance would have been impossible for him early in your marriage. He simply would have run away, as he wanted to run away this time. These are obviously not the only issues involved. They were simply trigger points. At the same time, he had not found himself yet where he wanted to go with his own career. He never thought of himself beyond the age of 30. In his dreams by then, he would be a well-known writer, and that was the glorious end of the tale. What seemed to be a time of most uncomfortable and unhappy circumstance was indeed a re-evaluation and adjustment, most necessary if the personality were to continue to function as a strongly creative, effective individual. There were then physical side effects. He was used to dealing with parents as enemies. Your own position as partially in league with those enemies, to his way of thinking, confused him further. His loyalty to you would make him by turns deny any backed-up feelings toward your parents, and then he would be forced to recognize them, and in doing so, he would become angry at you for having parents. It was the religious connection at your father's funeral that upset him. His reactions were based upon the past and had to be brought up into the present, and worked through, and this largely has been done. Your mother, for example, is quite aware that Robert has in his own way grown to cherish her. He was ready to move the minute your parents got in difficulty, and was outraged that you did not do so. He is discovering through your own parents that parents are simply people. The charge gradually thus becoming manageable. The difference in age to some extent applied, in that he became angry at you than for being enough older than he, so that your aging parents would become a difficulty. Such problems would have had to be faced in any case, but they were faced creatively, and brought about realizations and your own psychic development. It was, however, like a second, more painful adolescence. He felt always on shifting ground, and could not get his footing. Hence, the rigidity. You may take your break. Now, give us a moment. Robert's father is with his mother from this life. She waited for him before reincarnating. They were closely involved in other relationships in past lives. On another level, she encouraged Robert in his own development. As Robert knows, she was a Christian Scientist and a reader. Both grandmothers, while seeming so different, were more than usual concerned with the nature of the soul, and their idea of what religion was. Robert would do well, in fact, to speak to Marty, sometimes mentally. In developing his own abilities and searching for answers through these stations, Robert also unconsciously sought and finds answers for his mother, since she was unable to find them, and answers for his grandfather, Berthold, as well. Robert's father was very bound to his mother. The energy went out of him with her passing. He had no intention of living to a ripe old age. He was very uneasy about Robert, until Robert met you, and he then turned Robert over to you. He wanted to join both Marty and Dorothy. His emotional direction, however, was always with his mother. He had been a woman, and Marty a man. Marty had owned him for a good deal of this life. While loving her, he depended upon her for handouts, and refused to set himself up indeterminately to point out the old relationship when he was forbidden independence. This time, his dependence was a source to hurt to her. He did not use his abilities fully to spite her, while loving her. This was the reason for the repressed aggression. He was basically childlike, trusting not people, however, but nature. They are having a reunion in death. He has met his former wife, but the connections are not good. The mutual attraction no longer exists as it did between them. The reunion is joyous, and his vision is clear at that in terms of his own selfhood. Dorothy is also there, and another member of the family from the West Coast will shortly join them. You may possibly be aware of Robert's father before he is. He would be afraid of frightening Robert, regardless of Robert's work. Rob asked, how would he appeal to Robert? They said, you may be aware of him without his necessarily appearing. He will look in on Midge, however. He remembers her with gratitude, but there is a possibility of an unpleasant death on her part that could involve fire, If so, he will see to it that she does not suffer. Now, you may end the session. My heartiest regards to you both. Remember to have Ruber speak mentally to Marty. Her thoughts are turned somewhat in your direction because of events.